Have you considered resigning over this? Because you're clearly embarrassed.
Of course, I have been. I have thought about this.
We have now the best of.
Wrong.
I'm not offended, but I want to hear why.
You're completely wrong.
Hard to watch on BBC iPlayer.
From 9 amazing space missions to the times Nessie made a splash, the list charts some of the most remarkable events that have made the headlines. Each episode dives into a new story, from the recent past right up to today, and discover there's a lot more behind the biggest and strangest stories. The List. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
This is BBC News, the headlines.
We are guilty as government, but also the community is guilty.
Thousands of people turn out for the funeral of the Olympic athlete Rebecca Cheptegei in Uganda. She was killed by a former boyfriend who'd set her on fire. Former senior US official tells the BBC President Zelensky's frustration over the use of long-range missiles against Russia is justified. And 2 US astronauts stranded in space for months say it was hard to watch their malfunctioning craft depart the International Space Station without them, but they were happy and trained to expect the unexpected. Right, let's get the sport now. Hi, Lizzie.
Hello, Lewis. Thank you very much. We're starting with a busy Saturday of football for you in the Premier League, because Liverpool's perfect start to the season has been halted by Nottingham Forest, who beat them at Anfield for the first time since 1969. Substitute Callum Hudson-Odoi was the...
We know it's massive. I think obviously as soon as the final whistle blew, you could tell everyone's emotions were buzzing. To do it in after 55 years is a crazy long time, but as I said, we're happy.
arriving in a typically unusual way. That is Ed Davey there, arriving at his party's conference. There was other things happening as well, though, and Damien Grammaticus is there, our political correspondent, who can talk us through what else has been happening at conference there. Damien.
Yes, well, you join us, and it's a bit of a celebration, really. So Ed Davey making a splash as he arrived there. The mood, a bit like the weekend here, pretty upbeat, pretty bright. One of the big events today was the speech by Wendy Chamberlain, who's the Chief Whip, MP for North East Fife. Now, you had sort of the moment on the stage today. Just tell me, so Chief Whip, you've gone to having 72 MPs now to marshal. I mean, it must be, it's obviously a moment that Lib Dems are delighted about, but how are you going to marshal those MPs to make a difference, to make it count?
Well, I think we're already doing a very good job of that, Damien, but yeah, there's no doubt that my role as Chief Whip has changed quite dramatically. But I think you just need to look at a couple of the set pieces that we've already had in Parliament, and you see the Lib Dems are there holding the government to account, being a constructive opposition, and the Conservatives are too busy with their latest leadership election.
Just tell me, though, I mean, you in your speech, you were talking about wanting to try and change things in Parliament, change the way it works, because you were saying that the Lib Dems now, as a third opposition party, bigger than, I think, any time in the last 100 years?
Yeah,
like
we're the biggest third party ever, so we absolutely want to make sure that that is represented, so that our constituents are represented. For every 3 Conservative MPs there's 2 Liberal Democrats, and basically our Parliament's set up for 2-party system, so we want to ensure that we're getting our fair share.
So how are you going to do that? I mean, you're the third party. The others are not going to want to change the rules, are they, to give you more airtime and more of a say?
Well, I think it's about being a constructive opposition. If you look at it, we had 3 select committee chairs. We've got health and DEFRA, 2 of the things that we campaigned on during the general election. But I think clearly we've got work to do, but it is about working in that cross-party, more consensual way where we can on issues such as social care, which Ed Davey campaigned so passionately on during the general election.
I mean, he did, and the NHS is clearly one of the sort of big themes that he's going on. The party's talking about this weekend. We're on the back of that report that we had this week about the state of the NHS. Being a constructive opposition is one thing, but is that going to be something that actually means people think you're making a difference and gets you noticed? Well,
you're obviously referring to the Darcy report this week, and I think the key thing that we certainly feel as Liberal Democrats was missing was really talking about social care within that. And our view is if you don't fix the problems in social care, you won't get to the root causes of some of the issues within the NHS, whether that be bed blocking or some of the wider issues, both in adult social care, but support for unpaid carers as well. So I think what we'd say in terms of being constructive, we want to work with the government where we can. But I think, and we've demonstrated that on things like winter fuel allowance, we want to point out when the government is getting it wrong.
Well, also with us, Craig Munro, Chief Political Correspondent for the Metro. I mean, what are your observations on, the Lib Dems? They had this extraordinary success in the election, targeting their support. How is that going to translate into now, and how do you feel they're translating it into what's actually happening, the real mechanics of it?
Yeah, I mean, it was an extraordinary election. It really was for the Lib Dems. The last election, 2019, they were left with 11 seats, and this time 72 seats. And the really extraordinary thing is they had more votes in 2019. It was about 3.7 million votes in 2019, 3.5 million votes in 2024, and yet 61 more MPs. It was a really incredible success of sort of strategising and targeting, as you said, the support. So, yeah, the extraordinary disaster really of 2019 is where even the leader famously lost her seat, is completely swept away, and as Wendy said, the largest third party in at least 100 years, the best result for the Liberal Democrats ever. So it's a really jubilant atmosphere here.
It is. When you're looking beyond here, though, when you're writing your stories about politics and what's happening, does that actually translate into more column inches for the Lib Dems and more sort of coverage for them, those 72 MPs, or is it literally the bigger parties that are still basically dominating?
Yeah, it's going to take a bit of time, I think, to shift that momentum maybe, because everyone's so used to this two-party model. But now that you've got the Lib Dems with so many more seats than even the SNP, were the old third party in Parliament, now, yeah, the Lib Dems are so much bigger. What I find interesting when I'm in Parliament is the different approach to opposition that Ed Davey, the leader, takes. when I'm watching PMQs, you know, Rishi Sunak for the Conservatives is going up against Keir Starmer for the first few minutes. And then when it moves to Ed Davey, it used to be that the third party with Stephen Flynn for the SNP and Blackford before him would be so much more adversarial and really sort of pushing hard on whoever was the Tory MP at that time, the Tory PM at that time. But now it's a much more gentle approach that Ed Davey's taking. It's a much softer. There's a lot more even agreement between the Lib Dems and Labour, and maybe that's making it difficult to sort of stand out in a media that really likes that sort of aggressive confrontation. But maybe the Lib Dems would argue better for politics in general.
Better for the public too. Yeah.
Wendy, thank you very much. Yeah, so it's true. Confrontation does generally get column inches and airtime and time on screen. So we'll see if the constructive approach works. But I'm looking forward to see what comes of the conference this week. Thank you for joining us. And with that, back to you,
Damien. Thank you. Now, since President Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine more than 2 years ago, there's been a crackdown in Russia on anyone expressing anti-war views. It's revived grim memories of the Soviet past, when denouncing colleagues and neighbours was widespread. Steve Rosenberg reports.
Nadezhda Buyanova is a doctor, but you'll find her in court, not the clinic. The 68-year-old paediatrician faces 10 years in prison, accused of spreading fake news about the Russian army. Nadezhda tells me, I read about this kind of thing happening to others. I never imagined it would happen to me. The story began at this Moscow medical center. A patient's mother claimed that the doctor had told her Russian soldiers in Ukraine are legitimate targets. The woman recorded an angry video. Her ex-husband had been killed fighting in Ukraine. Then she wrote this denunciation of the doctor to police. It was enough to put her on trial. 400 miles away. Different trial, same charges. Near St. Petersburg, hairdresser Anna Alexandrova had fallen out with her neighbour Irina over a plot of land in their village. Their family feud led to Anna being reported and accused of posting messages critical of the war in Ukraine. She faces up to 15 years in prison. Any regrets from the other side? I feel sorry for her, says Irina's mother, Natalia. I don't want her to get a long sentence. I want her to receive a just punishment, says Irina. Across the country, there are reports of Russians informing on Russians.
One thing Russia's war in Ukraine has done here is turbocharge the hunt for internal enemies, for alleged traitors. And it's in this atmosphere of us against them that you get neighbour snitching on neighbour, students informing on their teachers, professors on students, and even parishioners denouncing priests.
But one thing Stalin did not give them, their freedom.
Sounds familiar. Under Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin, denunciation was actively encouraged. The prison camps, the Gulag, were full of victims who'd been snitched on by their fellow citizens.
What I find really remarkable is how quickly Russian genetic memory has come back. How things that people who didn't live in those times suddenly act as if they did. Suddenly they are squealing on others. Yes, it is a Soviet practice, but it's also something about the Russian genetic code of fear, of trying to protect themselves at the expense of others.
And in this atmosphere, look what's happening. Some Russians are taking the law into their own hands. On a Moscow bus, two men attack 87-year-old Dmitry Grinchy. They say they overheard him insulting Russian mercenaries fighting in Ukraine.
He lunged at me, flashing his eyes and gnashing his teeth, as if he wanted to bite me. He called over his son, a big guy, who pressed his finger into my arm to hurt me. I've got bruises here and here.
The two men forced Dmitry off the bus and dragged him to the police. He wasn't charged, but the incident has left Dmitry shaken and angry.
The Russian constitution says that everyone has the right to free speech. Why should others get to say what they think and not me?
Under Stalin, Dmitry's father was arrested and executed, an innocent man. Russia's past is a painful one, but it's the present that worries Dmitry, with Russia once again searching for enemies and agents and heading in a dangerous direction. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
Let's get some of the day's other news now. Narendra Modi has held a huge rally in Indian-administered Kashmir for key assembly elections. His visit to Doda is first by an Indian Prime Minister in more than 4 decades. He told crowds his BJP government would grant full statehood to Jammu and Kashmir. The elections are the first in the territory since the removal of its special administrative status a decade ago. Algeria's constitutional court has confirmed Abdel Majid Tebboun's victory in last week's presidential election. It says he won a second term in office with 84% of the vote, but the voter turnout at just 46%. The other two candidates had complained of irregularities and appealed to the court to review the outcome. Mr. Tebboune is widely seen as being backed by the military. Zimbabwe will cull 200 elephants as it faces severe drought and food shortages. The meat from these elephants will be distributed to people struggling to feed themselves. Neighbouring Namibia also carried out a wildlife cull last month because of the drought. Zimbabwe is home to an estimated 100,000 elephants, second largest population in the world after Botswana. Zimbabwe's last cull was more than 35 years ago. One of England's largest school academy trusts wants to ban mobile phones for students during the day. The Ormiston Academy's trust says it started phasing out access to smartphones for its 35,000 students because of what it calls the catastrophic impact on children's mental health and learning. Meanwhile, some parents in England's West Midlands are concerned smartphones could be bad for their children's development, so they've decided to test out phones that have no access to the internet. Our reporter Joanne Whittle has been to meet them.
In the 80s, yuppies posed with huge mobile phones, but no one was glued to screens. In fact, their phones didn't even have screens. They were purely for making calls. Imagine that. Fast forward to today, and 10-year-old twins Imogen and Toby and their pals are going retro. They have feature phones, which are basically a smaller version of the old brick phone with no access to the internet.
We can call and text loads and it's really good. There are games and you can call and you can text, but there isn't any internet. At first, I genuinely didn't want one because I thought everyone's going to make fun of me. Everyone's going to think I'm just weird for having one. At first, I was a bit really angry at Mum, but now I'm really like it, as now basically all my friends have one. When I found out that my friends got one, that made me happy because I knew I could. I said to my mum, "Oh, can I have one?" And she was like, "Sure." So yeah.
So instead of scrolling through social media, they spend more time playing at home in Shrewsbury. Their parents are part of a growing movement called Smartphone-Free Childhood.
This movement is not about judging parents who've made decisions in the past when they didn't have enough information available to them.
Harry has a feature phone and it's worth about £50 rather than an iPhone which is £600 or £700.
The group wants parents to sign a pact not to buy their children smartphones until they're 14. There are more than 120,000 members across the country.
You don't want them to be bullied for not having a smartphone, but at the same time, you don't want to expose them to all of the risks that come with smartphones. It's the exposure to harmful content. It's the addictive element of smartphones.
The children here are happy with their internet-free phones, but Tess admits their reaction wasn't great initially.
Because nobody else had a feature phone at that time, and it was, "Mum, it's not fair."
Her hope is that simpler phones will become a social norm for children under 14. Joanne Riddle, BBC News.
Next, it's been claimed some supermarkets are keeping the costs higher for online shoppers, making own brand items unavailable and charging them more than those who head in-store. Our reporter Simon Spark has more.
Totally disappeared.
Lee is a loyal Asda shopper. He pays for their annual delivery pass so he can order his shop online and get it to his door, something he needs to do for his family.
I'm a full-time carer, look after my wife and the son, so it's very difficult for us to get out.
But recently, he's been forced to pay more.
The baked beans, normally about 27p a tin for the essentials, totally disappeared. Next one is 42p or Heinz.
These are the items Lee couldn't get online. Lee's list includes apple sauce, in-store price 72p, cheapest online £1.70. Baked beans, in-store 27, online 42. Baked beans and sausages, in-store 50p, online 56. Instant coffee, in-store 99p, online £2.25. Garden peas, in-store 28p, online 55. New potatoes, 38p in-store, online 75. So what should have cost £3.14 in store actually costs £6.23 online. Multiply that out by everything you can see in this picture and that's a difference of over £29.
It's affecting a lot of families, and other people out there with low incomes are forced to pay them bigger prices and they just can't afford it.
But it seems Asda are not the only supermarket being selective with what goes on their website. We've found that Morrison's Savour range has also gone missing. So we've brought Lee's list.
And again, it was a similar story, with all Savour ranges in store, but not on the website. This time on 5 items, what should have cost £2.50 in store would cost customers £5.69 online, more than double. We also checked Lee's list against Tesco's and Sainsbury's, but they did list their budget range online. In response, Asda says they have one of the largest value ranges on the market, and like any retailer, we regularly review and adjust that range to reflect customer shopping habits. As a result, we removed some Just Essentials products from Asda.com earlier this year. And Morrison's told us they offer online customers great value through our Aldi and Lidl price match and more card offers. Our minimum online order is also one of the lowest in the market at £25.
Normally a shopping budget is about £50 a week, but that's gone up to 70, 80 now. It's completely unfair.
Simon Spark, BBC News.
Now, surrounded by rolling green hills and overlooked by a 13th century palace, a tiny village here in the UK has been named as one of the best secret villages to live in by the Times newspaper. This beautiful setting and community spirit earned Bishop Wilton a place on the list. Current residents, though, rather you didn't know about it. Sarah May Bucciari has been to find out why.
Well, it's pretty horrible, really. I mean, this place here, I wouldn't come here again, and prices are extortionate.
I don't know, there's not, once you've been here for an hour or so, there's not much left to do, really. That's it.
And the pub's closed?
Yeah, pub's closed.
Toilet doesn't flush very well.
Yeah.
People can be a little bit nosy. You can't really do anything without everybody knowing what you're up to.
Do you almost want to keep it hidden so you don't have an influx of people?
We don't people from Scunthorpe, you mean? Yeah.
Right, that's rude, because I'm from Scunthorpe. So the locals may be having us on there. They'd like to put us off. This is how they really feel.
It doesn't matter where you are in the village, where you look, there's always a nice vista to look at.
Would you describe it as a hidden gem?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I'm a bit annoyed with the Times for releasing that.
Would you rather they kept it quiet?
Yeah, absolutely.
That view there, the people, the green, the whole place. I came here, 9.5 years ago. Just made me better. It was amazing.
When I have my break and I just stand there and just think, I am so lucky.
One of the very precious things about the village is the church, St Edith's, which is a Grade 1 listed building. A fantastic floor, which is a copy of a mosaic in the Vatican.
Perhaps the biggest fans of this place are the kids at this village's school.
There's lots of wildlife, and also it's very out in the open. It hasn't got lots of big tower blocks. It's also quite secret, so it's really nice.
Would you rather keep it a secret?
Yeah. Also that everyone's kind and it's all calm.
Now, tram drivers from across Europe have gathered in Frankfurt to take part in the European Tram Driving Championships. The drivers showcased their talents in a series of tests, including braking, starting and readying signs. Each team consisted of one male driver, one female driver, and a team coach from the public transport company of European City. As well as hoping that it's entertainment, they also hope the contest will present tram driving as an attractive form of employment. Right, before we go, I just want to leave you with these pictures. This is Drifter, cat, being rescued here after getting trapped in a sewer for nearly 8 weeks. 3-year-old cat disappeared from his home in Minnesota mid-July. He's now safe at home and will make a full recovery. That's it. This is BBC News.
Live from London, this is BBC News.
We are guilty as government, but also the community is guilty.
Thousands attend the funeral of Olympic athlete Rebecca Cheptegei in Uganda. She died after being set on fire by a former boyfriend. President Zelensky again stresses Ukraine's need for long-range missiles as Biden and Sir Keir Starmer meet in Washington, but make no policy change announcements. The government of South Sudan is holding an emergency meeting hours after it announced elections would be delayed for another 2 years. And trained to expect the unexpected, 2 US astronauts explain how they cope with being stranded in space. Hello, I'm Catherine Biarahanga. Thousands of people have attended the funeral for Ugandan Olympic athlete Rebecca Cheptegei, who was killed by a former boyfriend this month. The service was in her family's hometown of Bukwo. She received full military honours, having been a member of the Ugandan Armed Forces. The 33-year-old marathon runner who competed in the Paris Games last month died after being doused with petrol and set alight. Rebecca Cheptegei's body was brought in from Kenya, where she lived and trained. Her death has renewed concern about the level of violence against women in Kenya and Uganda. Her former partner has since died of his injuries.
We are guilty as government, but also the community is guilty. It is not true that we did not know, even in the local community, that Rebecca was facing family problems.
I want to say polo to the family of Rebecca Cheptegei. It is really a sad moment in Uganda, Athletics Uganda, and all of us friends. As the we went to Paris with Rebecca, we really felt it because
Bye.